welcome back to another episode of Gaming at the Round Table with Maverick, Jojo, and me, Crystal. I'm going to start this off by actually handing it over to Joe.
Well, it's June, and it is June 6th right now, but it is men's. Yeah, my mental health is there, I promise. But it is June, so it is men's mental health awareness. So one of the topics we're going to talk about is gaming and mental health and the benefits and challenges of it, and kind of how it affects everybody in different ways. But I think for men, just as an overarching community, it's a big factor, especially these days where it's become far more popular. I would say for me personally, it's a good escape because we all go through different things. Out of the three of us, I'm the only one with kids, and I have three kids. So there are times where it's just kind of like you want to forget what's going on, and when you have everything going on in life, it's kind of hard to let those things go. And I think that's one of the better things with gaming as a whole is you kind of learn to let things go and forget it for a little bit.
Hmm.
I don't know how it affects you guys. I mean, minus one of us, but just overall how gaming helps with just your general mental health, I guess is the best way to put the question.
Hmm. So it's a broad topic because you can obviously, we could change gears in a minute here and go, what's the perception? I know, at least growing up in primarily the 90s, there was a heavy emphasis on video games being the corruption of society, right? And that really panned out in two perspectives, and none of which I feel were accurate from my experience, and quite the opposite. So I'll circle back here in just a second. But I did want to mention that there was a heavy stigma being a gamer in the 90s because there was this whole movement about it's going to teach violence, incite, all the things you see in violent video games, basically. That was all over the news. And then the other aspect was the not media based impressions. Oh, hey, nerd, what game are you playing? I see you play video games. When you go outside, play basketball, throw the ball in their face kind of thing.
Go touch some grass.
Right. That wasn't a phrase back then. But yeah, exactly. It was more like just nerd, slam their head in the desk.
Like that was
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Why don't you talk to a real girl? That type of phrase was pretty popular. So interestingly enough, that type of stigma, although it's really not as much of a thing today, and if it is, it's generally just kids regurgitating things they've heard or seen, which probably was true back then, but less social media. I had the exact opposite experience. When I'd be playing video games, it was a form of mental stimulation at first and not really escapism. I think as an adult, ironically, when I'm more mentally prepared to tackle the world, I more often use gaming as an escape mechanism to not necessarily run away from my problems, but to just change gears, right? So you're not just thinking about, okay, I got these 5 upcoming bills in the next 2 days, and I've got to think about meeting up with my family and all the dynamics you deal with day to day. But as a kid growing up, I actually think it was not just escapist and mental health in that regard. It was actual like mental health in the terms of like brain plasticity and having hand-eye coordination, maybe not with a basketball, but ironically with much smaller fine-tuned things. I remember as a kid, something that stuck with me. My father said to me once after gaming with Joe and I, he said, don't your thumbs hurt?
No.
And I'm sitting there like, what? Why would my thumbs hurt? That's like, what's wrong with you? Old man hands, I guess. And he wasn't that old. It's that the hands were already trained from a young age to be very dexterous because we grew up with, we were the first generation of real, like true gaming. And so the Twitch reactions and all that stuff, like 13-year-olds today are just insane, millisecond reaction type nonsense. But that was a new thing that hadn't been studied. The military started getting into it. I'm going off on tangents, but I truly believe that my brain, like my reading comprehension, was probably multipliers higher than it would have been had I not been a gamer as a kid, playing games with heavy amounts of text that I would read. And I was doing that for fun. So some of my friends read books, but they were always books intended to be age appropriate, right? So, like, what was really famous back then? The aliens that can transform was a really famous one.
Beast,
Yeah, it's hard to remember the
what
name.
was it?
Super famous at the time.
Goosebumps was a big one.
Right. There are very popular ones that people read, but they were really geared towards your bracket. When you were playing like a fantasy RPG, sometimes it'd be overly simplistic, and sometimes it would have advanced philosophical concepts caked in that I didn't know that it was based on Nietzsche or, any other philosopher for that matter. I was just reading and absorbing, and my mind was expanding. Basically, I got to perceive world cultures without ever leaving my room.
Mm.
And for that era where social media literally didn't exist,
I mean, the internet was still relatively new too.
yeah. I mean, we're talking about an era where even with the internet, as soon as you got a phone call, you were off the internet. It was,
We had dial up. If you don't know what that is, you're way too young.
yeah. So experiencing other cultures without having to travel was impossible. But I got the opportunity to play these Japanese imported games that opened my eyes not only to glimpses of their culture, but glimpses into philosophy and stuff that I wouldn't learn in the education system until I was nearing college. So I
Or
truly believe that my brain advanced faster and in a more robust manner. So we're talking about mental health, right? Like my brain is better for having gamed at a young age. Now, as an adult, there's the whole stress aspect. It is in my opinion, a very healthy alternative to the stereotypes of reacting to stress. I don't go binge drinking. I don't go shooting up heroin, right? Like I there are other things I could list off as examples, but the premise is there. There are much more unhealthy ways to relieve stress or just escape the mental stress of life that's unavoidable. It
mm.
doesn't matter whether you make good decisions or bad decisions. Life is tough. And gaming nowadays is really tough too. But like, it's more engaging, it's more fun, and you get to choose your battles, and they feel like things you can accomplish. All right, thanks for listening to this TED Talk. Crystal, what about you?
um, well, I mean, for the most part, as far as mental health goes, there was a very long period of time that I struggled with my feelings, specifically towards myself. And I was introduced to Final Fantasy 14, and for the first time, I found myself like, you know, having a big group of friends and, finding a bunch of people that cared about me online. And I don't know, the escape part was there, but there was a sense of trying to think of how to word this because it was just all over the place back then, right? Like I had a confidence boost because I was in the top 5% of a class. I had a support network of friends who always cared and checked on me. And actually, some of those people to this day are still my friends. And I started playing that game back in 2000, what, 16, 15? It was a long
That was
time
a
ago.
while back.
So, as far as mental health for me, I mean, I can almost say when I really got into gaming, I feel like it changed my life as far as how I dealt with a lot of things. So my mom always used to tell me just write it on a piece of paper and crumble up your feelings and throw it away. And I was like,
Well,
or or I can kill stuff in a video game.
you touched on an aspect I didn't even mention that I want to give Joe a chance here and circle back to him. But last note, You mentioned meeting people online, right? Gaming is not exclusively a single player activity, and not only have Crystal and I made real life friends from the gaming industry that we ended up meeting and spending lots of real time with.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first person I ended up speaking to from game to like non-game topic, like just outright talking to this person. And he was much older than I was, not in a predatory situation. He just happened to be older. And I got to talk about things like taxes
Yeah.
and bylaws and buying and selling, things that required interest, topics that aren't talked about in school. And again, this was happenstance. And had I not been gaming, seriously gaming, there's no way I would have been talking to this individual. There's no way I would have had those conversations or been as nearly prepared. And I could have spoken to my parents. I'm blessed in that I have a healthy working relationship. But sometimes you don't want to ask your parents for certain
Yeah.
pieces of advice or about life because there's lots of reasons, right? Let's just say pride for one of them, right? And so having that network of real people, because games, of course, are fairy tales, but the people you meet playing them are very much real people. And there's so much to learn and share and rely on each other there. It's an extra network, especially once you leave school,
Mm.
right? Like up until if you go to college, all through college, you've got this built in network of people around you. And then you get into the real world. Sorry if I'm hitting my mic. Um, and suddenly there's no built in social network for you anymore. And, there's online, sure, but
Just work.
right, exactly, just work. And half the time you don't even like the people you work with because of work complications.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really nice to have that. We're all focused on one goal, just like in regular school. And consequently, we have that in common, and you just start to socialize and you develop these hopefully healthy, long-standing relationships.
Mm.
And that's been a significant impact for me and my mental health and just quality of life.
I want to touch on that because I worked at a school for well over 10 years. I was a coach for 15 plus years. And I'll never forget being in the weight room because I ran the weight room for the place that I worked and hearing the kids talk about games or different certain things. And then I would say, wait, have you tried this part of that game? And all their faces go, you play video games? Like, no way. And then when I got to play with a couple of them, once they got like a little bit older and I got their gaming information, and just to see that there was a healthy avenue compared to when we were younger, because I
Mm-hmm.
was born in '85. Like, I don't care how old people think I am. And a big thing that was an issue, especially when I was in middle school, was a lot of gang type things.
Yeah.
And a lot of that stems from some kids, especially the outcasts, the nerds of what they considered nerds, and people that were just generally what they considered like quirky, never really felt like they fit in anywhere. And I feel like gaming takes that face away from a lot of people and it allows them to be who they really want to be and they find their people. And in saying that, I mean, like, you find another kid that likes, or another person that likes what you like as much as you do. And you get to have those conversations, like you mentioned, with people you probably would never have. Because, I mean, if you look at certain people, like if you looked at my brother and then you looked at me,
Hi.
when you're walking by in person, you're not going to sit there and have certain conversations just looking at us. But if we were playing a game and all you hear is a voice, what somebody looks like doesn't really matter. Whether they're tall, skinny, short, bulky, like I've seen muscleheads twice my size be amazing at games. And we could talk about it, and it opens up doors to other conversations, like my brother said, that you normally wouldn't have. And I think as far as just the general mental health for a lot of people, not just men, but I think for men in a specific way, because it wasn't as popular for women when games were just coming into things,
Yeah.
it gave us a more private way to vent.
Yeah.
Because I remember having conversations with people that I played games with about just things that were going on in my life. And then getting advice that I probably normally wouldn't have gone out of my way to get, because we were just in between or in a lobby waiting for like a game to start. And you just say, "Hey, how's it going?" And then you're talking to somebody and they go, "Oh, by chance I'm a doctor." Like, "Oh, what type of doctor?" And then, "Oh, I'm this type of doctor." And you wind up getting conversations again you normally probably would never have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think like I'm getting a little bit lost in it, but having an outside resource inside of something that you can go to without having to pay, or again be uncomfortable in a way that you can't naturally open up.
Yeah. I think a lot of it too is, unlike most experiences in life where you're doing something with other people, gaming weeds out a lot of the people that you would normally not want to associate with. Because think about the game you play. Think about your top 3 favorite games in your mind, or even just the games you've put the most hours towards. Those games are going to be appealing to people with this at least vaguely similar interests as you,
Mm.
right? So all 3 of us are not a huge fan of a particular game. I'll stop bashing it. So I'll use an example of a game I like. So I really like Final Fantasy and its series, right? That's going to attract a certain type of crowd. It They vary widely.
Yeah, they do.
There are millions of people, but it at least weeds out the people that would go, "What is this garbage, you freaking nerds? Like, push up your glasses, like, get the hell out of here," right? Like, you're going to weed those people out instantaneously by default by
Yeah.
playing that type of game. You might not weed them out if you're a big fan of, I don't know, for sake of argument, a sports game. And you might not weed those people out because maybe they're just sports people and they've got nothing to do between their training and all that, and they're like, all right, I'll play some more basketball while I can't play basketball. Right, like whatever. I'm not saying everyone that plays that, right? I'm just saying you can eliminate those people that are so radically different from you right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, even in high school, when I was playing sports on teams, I never enjoyed watching a sport ever.
I'm actually the
Only
same
in
way.
person.
Cannot stand it. I remember telling someone that, and they're like, "Oh, you never played sports, huh?" I was like, "Well, I never said I didn't play sports. Like, I was on 3 different teams in high school." I'm saying I cannot watch sports because I'm not playing.
I'm the
And
same way.
yeah, so like video games allows me to do more than I watch. And there's a lot of other personalities that I'm not sure I would hang out with, and not in a confrontational way. Like, I won't name anyone, but we all know at least one person, the 3 of us, that prefers to watch TV and doesn't really play video games. Like, I'm sure you can think of people.
Hmm.
And some of them I really like as humans.
My grandma.
There we go. Yeah, I love your grandma.
I love my grandma too.
But she's not someone I'm going to sit there and shoot the breeze with
Uh huh. Uh huh.
for an extended period of time, right? And
Yeah.
and so by playing these games, I'm starting to stutter here. I'm naturally going towards the people that have at least vaguely similar interests, and to some extent, that kind of works with vaguely similar life circumstances. I don't think it's nearly as prevalent, but there are certain niche gaming arenas where you will primarily find their market audience, right? Um, so it is a nice way to be involved with people that are going to be able to communicate with you in a way that. So what do you do? Oh, I'm a fisherman. I live in Alaska, and I spend 90% of my year on a boat doing hard manual labor. My response to someone like that would be like, "That's rough, bro. Like, good luck with the money." I don't meet too many people that fall under that type of description, and I'm not bashing that. Obviously, they've got their priorities straight. I don't. I like the fact that most of the people I'm going to end up talking to are going to be people that can find the time to try to unwind in the way that I do, as opposed to go out to the bar or whatever.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've noticed, excuse me, was you had not a voice, but you had someone to go to talk about certain things that normally I think as men we internalize.
Oh yeah.
And I think it gave a lot of people, especially I'll say it as for myself. I'm one of those I just throw it on my back and just keep on going. If it's rough, I'm like, all right, whatever it is, what it is. Like that's just how I deal with it. There's certain people that I've played with for well over 5 years, some probably even longer than that, that I've had the opportunity to talk to about certain situations that I was going through that I didn't normally feel like comfortable talking to pretty much anybody. Because some conversations face to face with people, even if you consider them good friends, can feel very, very awkward.
Mm-hmm.
And when you find the right group of friends, and I'm not just saying like a random person you pop into a lobby with, you just sit there and be like, "How's your day going?" Well, my dog got run over by a car today. I mean, that's rough. Don't get me wrong, but
Sorry, Timmy.
there's people that you can confide in that again you may have never seen in person that are
Mm-hmm.
there for you, and they may and that's the good part about playing with people at all age brackets is that you can share your experiences. And I've had to do that with some people that I met that were a couple years younger than me, and they started going through certain situations that I had already been through. I was like, hey, just an FYI, you may want to try this. And you could hear their voice go, I can do that. And you don't even realize you had certain options because you didn't know who to talk to. And when you talk about mental health and men in general, there's such a heavy stigma when it comes to talking. It could be from simple talking about stuff to like the real serious stuff that you probably wouldn't talk to a person unless you were paying them because they can't talk to anybody else. So you can find certain people inside of gaming and it helps you on levels that you can't put a value on it. And I think gaming gets overlooked for that. And like you mentioned earlier, that there's that stigma that it's going to make you do really bad things and learn how to do certain things that you shouldn't be doing when you're younger. But I think culturally it allows you to see things that, like you mentioned, you normally wouldn't. And it helps you cope with things better compared to before where you just had, if you saw something, you had nowhere to go with it.
Yeah. We've touched a lot on the social aspect. I think it's worth also mentioning that gaming industries at large have also begun to touch on the heavy topics, even single player.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I would wager that most of the ones I'm referring to are single player experiences where they've really come out with outstanding games that touch on moral dilemmas and psychological mental health really.
Mm-hmm.
One game that comes to mind off the top of my head is Catherine, and I never played it, but it's a game about I don't want to use that example. For
The
anyone that knows the game, there's mental health associated
last
with
game
it.
I reviewed is very big on that. Just, I don't mean to like take it from you,
Oh,
but
that's a good point. Yeah,
the last game I reviewed is called, yeah, no, I'm blanking on it.
death something.
Happy,
Have a nice
have a
death.
nice death.
Yeah.
So the overarching theme of the game was your death, and you have to deal with work related stress and how it affects you on a day to day basis, and burnout, and all these different things that normally you wouldn't think of being a good game.
Mm.
But when you play this game, you see how it can take a toll on you, and it kind of shows you different ways to kind of work through it without saying, sitting in front of a psychologist and saying, well, what are you feeling today? Angry. Well, what should you do with your anger? Bash everything. No, no, no. Let's find a healthier avenue.
Can you recall one of the examples in the game?
Uh, Burnout was probably the biggest one that they stressed on, and it was funny because it's a roguelite game. So in those types of games, you die a lot. So like, you get frustrated, you get like annoyed, and then you just get sometimes you get to the point where you just like want to chuck your remote. And when you get to working and things like that, there's points where you get so frustrated with people. You're like, I don't know, and it kind of shows you how to deal with burnout, and that sometimes you need to take a step back, and the game will literally tell you, you're seeming to have a hard time. Do you need to take a breather? Do you need to go walk outside for a second? And it's one of the first games I've ever seen do that.
Yeah. Sorry, that just gave me a flashback. I can't remember which, but one of the Final Fantasy games, it might have been 11, some online game. I was playing for an unhealthy amount of time once. And I got a message from the system that said, "Hey, you've been playing for 2 hours straight. You should consider a break." And I was like, "Whoa, that's awesome. I'm not gonna, but that's really cool." Like, good on Square or Enix, or and that was not required, right? It's not like I was dying in the video game like your example, which is phenomenal. I love that they did that. It was just, here's a game that makes money by having me be addicted to it and everyone else. The more you play it, the more money they make. And they took that extra development cost, because it served no purpose in game, and just said, "Hey guys, mind your mental health, take breaks, do other things." And I was blown away when I saw that message, especially because it had nothing to do with the game. I'm trying to think of any other examples. It's hard to think and feel like you need to talk at the same time. So I'm going to be quiet for a moment. You guys take over, but I'm going to think of another example real quick.
I'm trying to think of a way that I could put it as far as, because again, let me think of the words. If there's a pause on the podcast, we're sorry. We're like hitting a point where we're kind of figuring out, like, because it touches on so many emotions for everybody. It's kind of hard to sit there and say like, well, gaming did this or gaming did that, and it that's where you kind of get lost, is that you get so you can sit here and be like, oh, I remember a time when I was 10 and this happened, and then I played a game and then I got an answer, and it's like it could be the most random game. You could have been playing Donkey Kong and then you broke a barrel, and then suddenly you were like, I have an idea, and you went and fixed something else that you were like stuck on.
Yeah.
You mentioned emotions, and I think that's an important part to the overall conversation of mental health in video games. Why do these help us, especially if we ignore the social aspect, right? Because we touched on that heavily. I love that, dependent on my mood or the vibe that I feel I want to be in, I can just change games.
Yeah.
And it is not just change what I'm watching, it's change what I am doing and thinking about and putting my energy towards. TV is similar. You can put in a feel good movie, but if you're not in a feel good mood, you're probably not going to finish that movie. You're going to go 5 minutes in and go, well, good for you, Stacy.
Oh,
Turn off the
gosh.
TV and find something else destructive to do, right? But with a game, it's interactive. So it's kind of like the studies they have where if you bite a pencil, it forces your mouth to simulate a movement that is similar to smiling. And studies, at least if it was true, studies showed that that was known to slightly improve your mood, just because you're physically mimicking something that your body mind relationship has learned this is a positive thing. You should feel positive. It's obviously not a cure for depression or anything, but it did have a gentle impact. I feel like games can be used in a very similar manner, and I do use them. When I am stressed out, I don't go play a first person shooter.
That's a bad idea. Yeah, you
Right?
got to be in a good mood for that.
And maybe some people do, right? Just like some people get upset and they just want to lift the heaviest weights they can find, or go run as fast as they can. Everyone has their own coping mechanism, and I think that's my point. It's almost like a choose your own adventure of emotion and mental stimulation, inclusive of what type of vibe and emotion are you feeling to play right now. And we have one
We're
more
at our
announcement.
mark.
Who wants to
Oh,
do it?
you can make the announcement, and we're at our mark. So
Yes. Okay. So the announcement I'll make is this has been Gaming at the Round Table with All Knights Media, and this actually will conclude our first season. So look forward to season 2 when we return. We're going to take a small hiatus, travel, get some stuff for you all to see on social media, and we look forward to announcing a bit more about our game. And so I'm gonna put myself out on the line here and say our birthday months are coming up. It's going to be July, August, September, and you guys can look forward to learning more about at least characters that align with each of those months in our upcoming game. That's as much as I feel safe as saying. So thank you for sticking with us, Crystal. Take it away.
I've been quiet almost this whole podcast. I don't even know where my brain's at. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Gaming at the Round Table. We're gonna log off as Maverick, Jojo, and Crystal. Bye.
see you later.